This Week in Radio Tech is brought to you by Axia Audio and Axia X Nodes. One day, all your audio gear will have an Ethernet jack. Until then, there's X Nodes.
Welcome to another week of This Week in Radio Tech. I'm Chris Tobin, and I'm covering for Kirk Harnack, who is on location, on assignment, actually in a part of the world where he just can't get himself together with the bandwidth he needs. It's not his problem. It's the problem of where he is. He's somewhere in Auckland, New Zealand. That's all we know. We're hoping to hear from him at some point. But until then, it's just myself and our guest this evening, Stephen Poole. Tom Ray is making attempts to contact us. However, he is taking care of family matters. I believe his daughter is going to a dorm back to school. So we know how that can be. So we'll let it roll and see what happens. So without further ado, let's talk to Stephen Poole, who's the CE Crawford Broadcasting in Birmingham, Alabama. We'll have Stephen. I'm sorry?
I said that's me. That's right.
Him. What we'll do is first talk quickly about what's in the headlines and see what's happening in the world of the radio business. And lately, I actually had a call from someone talking about HD radio and asking where things stand with that. And in a recent, I think, Radio World article, there was some talk of HD radios actually expanding. So it's interesting to see. So check out Radio World for the latest on that. Also, don't forget, the latest now with the FCC is looking to try and find ways to help the AM band or AM broadcasters. We'll see. There's a commissioner who's trying to push things and make things happen. So if you find out or hear anything with AM broadcasting and FCC, read about it and have your company or radio station try and support where possible. Otherwise, AM radio broadcasting may go the way of analog television as we know it, and see where that got them. So it's not going to be fun. Still viable, medium is AM and FM. Television still works, but in the long run, when you need to do something and focus on one item, the only medium that works best is radio. You can listen while doing something else. So you can truly multitask with radio. Television, not really. But that's okay. So, that being said, let's talk with Stephen Poole. Stephen, if you would be good enough to just explain to everyone what you do, where you're from, Crawford Broadcasting, group ownership, things of that sort, and then we'll get into some nitty-gritty about the business itself.
Sounds good. Well, of course, like I say, I'm the market chief engineer for Crawford Broadcasting in Birmingham, Alabama. I work for the best company in radio. Don Crawford he actually runs the company. He's one of the greatest men I've ever known. My immediate supervisor, my boss, Chris Alexander, is one of the best engineers in the business, and he is absolutely a ball to work with. All of our stations here are HD, the FMs and the AMs. We have 3 FMs and 2 AMs. They're all HD, multicasts on the FM. It's just having a ball, doing the usual engineer's gig, keeping us on the air, keeping everything working when possible, and making sure that we're on the very bleeding edge. That's my job.
Oh, I like that job. That's the kind of job I used to have. So with the stations doing HD, I'm curious because we've got calls a lot about that. What do you do different to make the HD successful, or I guess say successful? I mean, I know the HD1 is basically the primary audio channel, and now it's in digital. Do you find it? You said you have multicasting, so I'm assuming it's HD2 and 3 is also available in the FMs.
Yes. Well, we're trying to balance the reality that we're still, let's face it, there's not that many receivers out there yet. They're increasing, but we're trying to balance the costs and the amount of effort with what we're talking. Basically what it is, we're compromising. We have 2 multicasts on one of our FMs, and then we just have 1 multicast on the other FM. But if you're asking me where it makes the biggest difference, on our main signal, on the main channel, in an area like Birmingham with a lot of hills, HD is a multipath killer. It just you don't have multipath. Right after we first put it on air, we had an antenna burnout, not 3 weeks after we went on air, and the HD was down for a couple of weeks. I was a very miserable man. I had forgotten how bad multipath can be with the HD. Seriously.
Now,
That's it on your main channels. Now on the secondary channels, because they are usually lower bit rate, the biggest thing you have to watch on them is the processing.
right,
You
that's right.
can't. I mean, you already knew you can't process HD the same way, but don't think that you're just going to take the output of your Omnia that's running the analog and like hook it into someone's multicast at 32 or 48 kilobits per second, because it will not sound good. It will not sound good at all.
So on that, along those lines, I know exactly what you're saying because the stations I used to manage, the FMs, we had HD2s and 3s, and at first everybody thought, oh, you just put an audio processor on the audio path and that's it. And well, lo and behold,
We all did that, and we even do it on the streams too.
right. Well, I tried to explain to some folks that the HD2 and HD3s, you should treat them, HD1 as well, treat them like a stream because they technically are a stream that you're just modulating. Putting
Exactly.
So I am curious with your discovery of the audio processing having to be different on HD2 and HD3. How did you go about finding the sweet spot or the best combination of technologies to make it palatable for those to listen on HD2 and 3?
Well, some of this is just common sense. First, make sure you have a processor. Try to get a processor that has a setting for digital audio. And as a matter of fact, if you get a processor that will do streams, it's fine for HD. Make sure it has a preset or a setting that is geared for streams. The other thing we like to do to help get rid of some of the swishing and the grittiness in the audio, another thing we like to do is just very smoothly roll off the high end just a little bit. Just, I mean, we're not talking about turn the treble off, but just roll it off maybe 6 dBs above, say, 7.5 kilohertz. Just roll it off a little bit. That makes all the difference in the world.
And on your HD2 and 3s, are you doing a combination of music and talk, or is it just primarily talk that's heard? Sports maybe or something?
We do have talk on one of them. The other one is music. We have an old fella here that has been doing Southern quartet style gospel since it was invented.
Wow.
And that was a joke. Not much of one, though. Not much of one. But he has been doing it for years. But a lot of his fans were just really pleased when we put his program on one of our stations, HD2s, and we gave it a little extra bit rate because it's music. And so we actually have some listeners here who bought HD radios just to hear his program, believe it or not.
Oh, I believe it. I many years ago, I worked at an AM radio station that it was only a 1,000-watt AM station. It was at 1,400 kilohertz on the dial, and we did something a little different. We were doing a full-service format, and in the days of programming full-service formats, it was sort of a hot AC music mixed in with news on the top of the hour, bottom of the hour, sports, and peppered with weather reports every 10 minutes type of thing as a full-service format. And we also, the program director who was from Pittsburgh, KDKA, he was actually an assistant PD at KDKA, got a chance as being a full-time PD, brought us in a conference room, myself, the engineering, and programming, sales, and I think it was a couple of the jocks, and sat us down and said, okay, guys, station right now has no ratings, which we did. We had 0.5 in the Arbitron. And the Arbitron diaries were only twice a year, fall and spring. So you know how that can go. And he said, we're going to do something completely different. We're going to approach everything with the phrase, who cares? If you can say to yourself, whatever you're doing on the radio right now, people will care about it. We've got a winner. Nobody knew what the hell he was talking about. They're like, what? We got to do this. We got to do that. He goes, no. We're going to break the mold. And I will tell you, for the following 6 years, the station went from nowhere to the number one station in the market. We beat out the 50 kilowatt FMs, two of the 50 kilowatt AMs that easily reached the market from New York City. This was a suburb of New York that we were operating out of. And we did stuff that today, by today's standards, people would be like, wow, you can't really do that. That's not going to work. Nobody would believe it. And it worked.
I believe it.
No, and I've traveled the countryside. The company I work with at Musicam USA, we do IP codecs, both video and audio for disclosure. And I travel around and I get to see and talk to people now in a different way. And I still see some of the great innovative, creative ways of doing radio. And it's just it's great. But when you go to the major cities, they get a little skittish. They choose not to. But when you're talking about, like you say, with your HD2s, and here's somebody playing music and it's unique, and they're purchasing HD radios just to hear it. If you have content that's compelling, that's how I'll just call it that. People will go out of their way. They'll go out of their way to find a to listen to it. And this AM station I worked for, we would do contests and give away these goofy prizes for lunches and dinners and stuff, and it was just fun. The goal was just to have fun, make you laugh. Well, one day we got a call from somebody, and they won the contest. The jock, the DJ took down the name, the whole information, and then called me and said, "Hey, I don't know where this is, but this guy's calling. He says he listens all the time, and he won the contest, but he doesn't live in the area." I said, "Where does he live?" "He lives in Queens." I was like, "Yeah, it's New York City. So what?" "Yeah, but we're in Connecticut." Because how the hell is he doing this? I'm like, "Well, he's probably got a super radio, GE super radio, and listening to us." So we call him up. I call up the guy, and I said, "Hey, congratulations, you won. You don't live in the area. Do you mind driving up here, or do you want us to do something else?" He goes, "No, I'll come up." He goes, "No problem." So I had talked to him a bit. I said, "So what exactly do you enjoy about it?" He goes, "You guys are fun. Because you make me laugh. I'm entertained. The music's good, but it's in between the songs." He goes, "I enjoy it. I got so many other stations that do nothing around here." He's calling from Queens, New York. Okay? And I'm like, wow, this was 1988, I guess it was. And I just sat there and was like, it just, the light goes off when you hear that. And then today, you got people trying to reinvent the wheel, and somewhere along the line they get lost. So to hear that you have an HD2 signal, HD3, and somebody's buying radios for the content, that's encouraging. I can't say it's true for everybody else that's been HD.
No, I don't. What you just said, I fully agree with. By the way, let me clarify something. When I'm talking about rolling off the high end, I think I said 6 dB. That is radically too much. Really, it's more like 1 or 2 dB, and that's only on low bit rate streams. You don't do that on the high bit rates. Okay, right. Just to clarify. Yeah, but I got to be careful. But you are absolutely right. One thing about me, whether not just engineering, I love radio. I believe in radio. I still believe in what radio does. I believe in its mission. And you are absolutely right. You didn't realize it, but I was kind of like cheering you on just then. Because these stations, and I'm trying to be careful how I say this so that I'm being diplomatic, but these stations that basically want to be 24-hour jukeboxes playing the same 30 songs over and over and over are what's killing radio. You're not going to get an argument you're not going to get an argument from me on that.
Well, I will say this. I was employed by a broadcasting company that was very progressive in their ways. There's a company was called Chase Broadcasting in Connecticut, and we had a couple of stations. People in the audience may know and remember if you're in the Northeast, WTIC AM and FM in Hartford, Connecticut, and we had stations in St. Louis and Denver. But the one thing that the executive staff, I'll call them, always encourage the staff of the radio stations to do is, you're a 1,000-watt AM station. So what? You're going to operate like a 5,000-watt AM station. You're a 3,000-watt Class A FM. You're going to operate like a 10,000-watt FM. And everyone's like, what? This is what we're going to do. These are the goals. We're going to set them high, and we're going to achieve them. And at the end of the day, we're going to win. And it's true, because I will say this: the radio station I worked for at the time made no money, had no advertising influence whatsoever in the county. And after Chase took over, within 6 months, we had a 1 share. People couldn't believe it. And we became the talk of the town in 6 months, because this program director took a very, by today's standards, a really wild-ass approach, to be frank. And it worked. And then within a year, we suddenly were starting to dictate where we'd be broadcasting from, where we would do stuff, which events we could participate in and make sense of. And it was wild. And today I go to these programming seminars and try to meet up with folks outside the engineering world just to better grasp where I call it the editorial side of the business and how technology can help it. Because I've always believed that technology should be quiet. You shouldn't be impairing the editorial folks, whether it be sports news or even music, and just make it happen. And it's just wild. Some of the stuff people say you can't do. It just doesn't work. I'm sitting there going, well, what you just said doesn't work. We did at a radio station and successfully made money at it. And people remembered us. And I was like, wow. And you're right. People today, I don't think, get it. They're just not paying attention. And the jukebox approach, I've always said this, and I have friends of mine for many years that laugh because they've gone to, friends of mine who are program directors. So I have a lot of folks who are not just engineering types. And I told them, I said, the problem we have in this industry, and many other industries do the same thing, the phrase, less talk, more music, had to be the worst thing any consultant or any programmer could have ever come up with. And then people say, well, no, that's good. I said, no, it's not. Because what you've done is subconsciously, and this is what they call subliminal advertising, you have subconsciously told people that whenever you hear something talking, that's bad. Tune out.
Absolutely right.
And think about it.
On money.
The next time you're in a car and you're driving around with folks who are not in the industry, and you have a music station on, or maybe even a talk station, and suddenly they something changes. Watch how fast they change the dial setting. You watch, and that's the problem. And back in the 80s and early 90s, it was less talk, more music, and it just destroyed everything. And the jukebox approach, you're definitely right, doesn't work anymore. I don't care what anybody says. You can be any programmer in the world, doesn't work. People can find their own way of doing music. Let's see, what's the latest that's been going on? Oh yeah, the Harlem Shuffle, right? Is that the latest craze? The Harlem Shuffle is from a musician. I'll be that kind, and it's proper. From a musician, no name, no history, nothing, no record label, and has made it big, top of the charts. And now I believe Billboard is now looking at YouTube to start looking for chart toppers. Okay?
Right.
So what does that say? That you can't just do jukebox. It's not going to work. And I don't know when it's going to happen and when it's going to hit people, but you just can't keep forcing it. It's not going to happen. So
No.
But no matter what we say, it's not going to change the way of the world and the industry itself. So I guess we'll just move along onto other more technical things that people might enjoy, or maybe not.
But we are permitted. We're permitted.
Well, we are permitted, and here's why. I just a couple of weeks ago had an opportunity to speak before some students at a local university in their broadcast program, and it was fun. I actually enjoyed doing it because it's kind of thing that sort of like giving back. But I spoke to them, and they said, well, why do you care about sales and programming and this and that outside the technical realm? And I told them, I said, well, if you're going to do anything in any business, and we'll stick to broadcasting for now. So you're an engineer for a radio station, you're an assistant engineer, or you're director of engineering, VP, whatever it is. Your job is not only to find the technology that makes the station run, we'll use in simplest terms, but your job is to help extend and find a way to bring to life what the programming department, whether it be sports, news, or music, is trying to accomplish, which is which at the end of the day is generating revenue. Let's not be silly. At the end of the day, it's about making money. The question is, how do you approach that, and how do you do it so that you make the money and repeat it every day without feeling it's like a mundane process, or feel like you're on an assembly line? And I explained to the students, I said, you have to understand how a salesperson thinks. There's nothing wrong with the salesperson in general. Yes, they have a certain stereotype, but it's the nature of the beast. You're asking somebody to go to someone else and ask for money. You're asking them to buy into something that's basically broadcast on the radio. It's not tangible per se. What's tangible is the results you get from people responding to that intangible item, which is the airwaves. So now what happens? You have a person who's trying to sell people on things. They're going to say things and do stuff that's somewhat we may consider not normal for people in normal conversation. But if you understand where they're coming from, then you can appreciate some of the goofiness they do, and you work with them. I have a story of I had a sales manager who used to walk past my office every day. I'd say hello. He'd nod and continue on his way. Then one day he shows up at my doorstep, the door frame that is, and says, "I have a question. I can how's it going today? What's going on?" I'm like, "Oh, today's going very well. It's been a good day. We've had this and that." And I told him a few things about the transmitter site and some issues we had with a couple of automation systems. And he's like, "Oh, that's great. You're really on top of things." So I stopped him midstream. I said, "All right, what is it you want?" I said, what do you want from me?" And he looks at me. He's like, "What? What? I can't just ask?" I said, "You can certainly ask. However, you walk past the office every day at 9:06, and you sort of nod your head to acknowledge I'm in the window, sort of like I feel like I'm in a pet shop or something, on display, and you never do anything else. Now you've come to my office, you ask about my day, how things are going, blah, 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 and all of a sudden you are offended that I ask you, what are you here for? It turns out he was looking for information on our coverage map of the signal for the FM station. And he was trying to understand better how to get a car dealership involved. And they said they can't hear the station, and, rightfully so, where they were located, they're not going to. But I did tell him, I tried to explain to him, I said, well, you can talk to them in this vein. They can advertise and do this and do that on the main signal. We also have the website, and they can reinforce their message through the website. But the fact is the audience they're serving is in our coverage area. So they're not losing out. What they need to do is encourage people to come down. So what we should consider is maybe a live broadcast tied into a local community event, and boom, they look like the heroes. He looks at me like, you're the engineer for the station? I was like, yeah, why? You just talked to me about a sales pitch. It's like, right. But I'm using the technology that we have to make it happen. I'm trying to tell you, if you want to do it, we have it. We can do a remote. We can do an RPU, Marty device. Everybody remembers the Marty units. Or you could use a POTS codec or an ISDN. But because I was able to talk to him on his level, this is where I'm going to, is he then has respect. More respect, and not the stereotype, that's the guy with the pocket protector, plaid shirt in the back office. Don't talk to him. And all of a sudden, now, when he stopped by, he walked past the office, he stopped in and said, hi, how's it going? And when he had a question, he would actually talk to you in a very, how would you say, intelligent, businesslike, and not a condescending looking down at you, or, it's the engineer again, we got to talk to him. I don't believe this. That's what I was getting at with the students. And they looked at me like, really? That's what you do? I said, yeah. If you could go to your general manager, the owner of the facility, I'm sure you have on many occasions had to talk to the owner, and you said, he says, look, I have no idea how we do this transmitter thing or the studio thing. All I know is 2 of the jocks keep complaining about X, Y, and Z. What do we got to do? You have 2 choices as the engineer when you're talking to the owner about the money. You could say, well, look, you can spend $20,000 and do this, or you can spend $20,000 and get this, and this as a result, and now you can expand on this, and we can actually go to places the sales department might be able to tie in, and we could make back the money and do other things. Which of those 2 scenarios do you think the GM is willing to listen to you with?
All right. No, I agree.
So, it's been interesting and fun watching how some people interpret what to do, and when you read the trades, it's like, wow, people are just missing the boat. So, from what you're saying with the HD content, loving radio and being passionate about it is no different than somebody who's, say, a friend of mine who, actually a friend of my wife's, she splits genes. She does DNA work, and she loves it. She's passionate about it to the point where she actually has done a thesis and a doctorate or something, and it's actually being published. It's the equivalent of, say, doing a patent.
Good for her.
Exactly. But, some people think of her as like a lab rat because she wears a lab coat and works on things in this big, funny-looking electronic microscope. But she's passionate about it, and she gets results. And that's what I think is missing with some of our brethren here in the radio industry. It's like, guys, you could be passionate about it. You could be an engineer. No one says you have to wear a pocket protector. I mean, not really. Really, you probably shouldn't. But, dress accordingly. If you're going to go to a meeting with folks in the radio station, don't dress in jeans and a torn shirt or something that looks like you just came out of the garage. Be presentable. Spiffy business, I think they call it. Spiffy casual. I did that a lot. I learned a lot from my early days working with some folks that just weren't interested in socializing with the rest of the radio station. I was like, I'm not going to go very far if I continue this path. And when I changed my appearance, it made a difference. And I think that's something to take away from what you're talking about. Do you experience that at your facility when you're working with others within the business, in your radio station group?
Sure.
You notice a difference of people?
Yeah, well, and this is probably one of the most overused terms everywhere now, not just in radio, but the idea of being on a team. I do feel like I'm on a team. Whenever someone here makes a nice sale, signs a really nice contract, they'll send out an email, and I always try to add my congratulations to that, to let them know that I am part of it and I appreciate what they're doing. I think you do have to. I think you do have to be part of the team, if we can use the word that way.
Absolutely.
And listen to. I agree.
All right, cool. So let's talk about some more specific stuff. So at Crawford Broadcasting, do you have? Is it just yourself at the radio station? Do you have assistants or others that you?
I have 2 of the best assistants in radio. A fellow named Todd Dixon and another fellow named Jimmy Parker. 2 of the best assistants a man could ask for. We all we all have, are prone to do anything at any time as far as work. But Todd generally tends to lean toward our computer issues. He's my computer geek. And then Jimmy has turned out to be the guy who runs to the transmitter sites and keeps an eye on things. And then I pitch in as needed and, of course, do all the paperwork and things like that. But, yeah, I have two great assistants.
So,
two good.
Oh, excellent. That's hard to come by. I had the pleasure a couple of times in my career to have some very good people to work with and learned a lot from them. I was always accused of being too too willy-nilly or too willing to just be easygoing about stuff. But I'll tell you, I learned a lot, and the folks that worked with me realized that I empowered them to get the job accomplished. They knew what the goals were, and they just simply did what they had to do, and they knew that if they made a mistake, and it was an honest mistake, I'd back them up. If they made a mistake,
let me share this one with you, because this is a true story. My brother came up in the food business. He's doing sales now, but he came up in the, believe it or not, the food industry, food service, restaurants. And he says he was in a fast food one day, and there was this guy working behind the counter. Lunchtime, they're all busy. Guy working behind the counter, and he accidentally drops a hamburger on the floor. Manager chews him out, says, "Don't you know that's money out of my pocket?" So the guy says, "I'm sorry." They go on. A few minutes later, it's crazy. He drops something else on the floor. The manager starts chewing on him again, and manager says, "Look, if you keep this up, I'm going to have to fire you." Right in front of the customers, too, which already shows you he had great class. Well, sure enough, my brother said within a few minutes he dropped something else. This time, the employee looked around, made sure nobody was watching, picked up that hamburger, and put it back in the rack. And what you take away from that, and I always tell that story to my guys when I tell them this, I say, as long as it's an honest mistake, we'll figure out how to fix it, but always admit it to me. Because if you're not careful, what's going to happen, somebody's going to go in a control room and is going to spill some soda in your console, and they're going to very quickly try to wipe it up and not tell anyone. You see what I'm saying?
Absolutely.
And, you see, I mean, I know sometimes you do have to, sometimes you have to take the firm hand, but I agree with you on that. Tell them if it's an honest mistake, if, you didn't mean to do it, your hand slipped or something like that, whatever, we'll just fix it. We'll just fix it. But as long as you come clean with me, we'll be fine.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. And I think that's what's missing in a lot of businesses, but I know in broadcasting, it's even more. We're a more intimate group than I think other industries tend to be. But I've worked in newsrooms all my life, and I can say that when you first start in a newsroom, you are not well accepted until the first big event takes place, and you show your colors. You show you got the chops to do it. And it's interesting where other industries, it's not always the same way. It's basically you come in, you got a set of credentials. Okay, you're expected, fine, move, you go here, do this and that. But in broadcasting, it's more than just having the credentials. It's like, okay, let's see if you can really cut the muster, and if you can, great. And then you're accepted, like a fraternity. But but you're right. If you do make a mistake, it best be honest. Otherwise, you'll be doomed for life. It won't fly. So, but before we go on, I need to we have to stop momentarily, not stop per se, but take a break. This is where our sponsor makes it possible for us to be here this evening. For many of you, and some of you may be viewing this on a download, so it might be during the day or an afternoon. And this is where our sponsor, Omnia Audio, the Omnia 9 takes place.
Omnia!
So, those of you who are not familiar with audio processing or the industry and around it, the Omnia audio processor, the Omnia 9 that is, especially, is a box that is genius thinking. And it was created by Leif Clayson, who I had the opportunity to meet at the NAB, the National Association of Broadcasters Convention, last year and the year before. Genius, brilliant, passionate, as we spoke earlier about being passionate about something. And we were talking about the processing and the approach and what he thinks is the best way and how it should work for FM and blah, blah, blah. And we're like, well, that's an interesting take on it. And he discovered a lot of these things by playing with sound cards from PCs. So the Omnia 9, the Omnia Audio 9 processor is more than just plug it in, turn it on, set a preset, and walk away, which by rights, no processor should be treated that way. But the Omnia 9 especially is an approach that guaranteed If you try it, if you get a demonstration model, if they do that with your distributor you have, whatever, you try it out. First thing you do is don't turn the knobs to 10. Don't turn them to 11. Take a preset and then back down on the stuff. And when you do that, you're going to hear things that you just never thought were possible on an FM signal with an Omnia 9. Trust me, I've done it. It's fun. It's cool. And I spoke with Leif, and he was just like, or is it Leif or Leif? Clayson, and he says, yeah, you have to sort of understand. You don't want to go in full bore, run the charge. You got to sort of back off and just take a slow approach. And once you've done that, the Omnia 9 just sweetly sings away, whether it's for music and voice. And if you do it with voice, the box can really bring out the brilliance of a sound of the person, whether it be male or female. And again, it has the controls, the thinking, the presets have the ability for you to say, oh, I don't know if I want that much high frequencies because that particular music is really bright because it's a powerful, string instruments, or maybe it's percussion, lots of highs. So you sort of find a way to bring it down, but still keep it within the realm of what the artist wanted. And then at the end of the day, you still have yourself a nice, loud, present, brilliant sounding station. Now, when I say loud, I don't mean screaming loud, for those of us in the technical where I flat line on the oscilloscope. I'm talking about above the average sound of in a car with the windows open. Okay, loud enough that you can have the car windows open on a nice summer day, hear your favorite tunes, and the Omnia 9 just blasts away, and you are unaware of the fact that the audio has been processed, brought to a higher level, sort of bringing out what the artist wants, and doesn't offend anybody. Stephen, do you have any Omnia 9s that you use, or you have Omnia products? I'm assuming for audio processing.
Oh yes. I'm trying to remember what numbers we do have. I'd have to look at our inventory.
Well, you know what? Aside from the number, Omnia 9 definitely is part of the Omnia family of processing, but it takes a slightly different approach. So think of it like you have the express train, and you have a local train. The tracks go side by side. Both are the same railroad themselves, but slightly different performance or expectations. Omnia 9 expectations are something, if you want to be a little creative and try something different, go for it. There's the Omnia 10, there's the other stuff. It's like, woo! Omnia 9 is definitely something you got to try out. Now, with your experience with the Omnia products, have you found that you can go very aggressive and get a little too grungy? Or have you found that if you go the other way, it tends to be a little more not dynamic, but more open and really excites the oral senses of the body?
Well, first, I just want to establish for the record that real men use stay levels. You need to know that. Stay level. Preferably with a volume max and driving into the red. Now that's radio.
This is true.
But yes, the thing about a really good processor, and the Omnias are good processors, they can make you sound absolutely delicious. They can also, if you push them too hard or you push them too far, they can make you sound bad. The key is the interface and how easy it is to adjust. And I have to give, that is one thing I like about the Omnia, that, it seems to be very logically laid out. Where if you decide I'm going to try tweaking and adding a little bit of bass here, taking out a little bit of the mid-range here, it's real easy to do that.
Absolutely.
And of course, the ability to save and restore all the presets, which I realize all of them have that now, all the digital ones. But still, they're very easy to adjust. I love them.
Well, you have to bear in mind, one thing I have to make a correction. I said Omnia 10, I meant Omnia 11. Not 10. That was something else I was thinking about.
But, I was wondering about that. But
yeah, you're absolutely right.
I'm terrible with model numbers.
I'm trying my best to do the right thing. I took some notes and I incorrectly put a 0 in place of a 1. But so the Omnia 11 and there's an Omnia 9. So we're talking Omnia 9 on OmniaAudio.com. Check it out. Contact your favorite distributor to get a demo if that's what they do. If not, work something out. Well worth the try. And if you do demo it, be serious about it. Be very serious and make the time to do the settings correctly. Just as Stephen pointed out, you have presets. You can do, you can get aggressive, get less aggressive. And don't worry if you think you're being less aggressive and not getting the job done. The box will do it.
I did the processing course for the SBE's online university. And the way that we described it in there, the key with any really good processor is, first of all, if it's easy to use, and the Omnias are easy to adjust, what you do is you make a few very minor changes. You just push this up a little, pull that down a little, pick a preset that you like, and then just tweak it a little bit, and then sleep on it. Go 24 hours. And, listen to a bunch of different program material, then try another little tweak.
Yeah,
That
absolutely.
kind of thing. It takes some patience.
It does
If you
take
think
patience.
you're going to sit down with a high-powered processor and make it sound absolutely delicious in 15 minutes, you are deluding yourself. That's not going to happen.
That's absolutely true. That's true. One thing to remind everyone when it comes to audio processing and audio chains, the audio systems at your radio stations, bear in mind the philosophy of, the old phrase, garbage in, garbage out. No matter what you have, if you're putting in and Leaf, I should say it's Leif Clayson and we spoke about this at NAB because his one concern was that people don't pay attention to what's going into the box and expect something really bad to go in and still come out good. Now, granted, there are some examples that he had shown me that some audio that's super processed from record labels that are just ridiculous, and his approach and his algorithms do clean it up, but that is not the regular way to go about it. And also remember, listener fatigue still exists in the digital domain. You may not hear it as well, but it's out there. So check your audio systems, make sure the audio chain is good and responsive, and then have at it with the Omnia 9, and you will be pleasantly surprised. Well worth the investment, in time and money, and the revenue that'll come out of it.
But now, Chris, don't forget, if you're using the stay level and the volume max, it's really a lot easier because then it's anything in, garbage out.
This is true. Those of you in the audience who
removes the headaches, all the variables are gone.
Those of you in the audience who do not recognize the names Volume Max or Automax or Stay Level or Level Devil.
These were old, and when I'm saying Stay Level, and actually the old RCA limiter, the Fairchilds, Chris, you know what's amazing? These old tube limiters are collector's items now.
Yes, they are.
And I've thrown them away. I imagine you have too. I mean, like years ago, we finally got our first decent processor and could not wait to throw that stupid Stay Level into the trash.
Oh, yeah.
We had held on to it. We could retire now and go on a vacation.
No, absolutely.
Sell that for.
But you know what? The one thing I have to say, and I explained this at another one of these student sessions I did for engineering, where we weren't talking the editorial, but we're actually talking engineering audio. And I mentioned to folks that you have to realize that a lot of the stuff we do now in the audio realm, and the Omnia is included in this, is that the Volume Max and Automax technologies, yes, they were dated. Yes, they were, an old thing, and we just hated it at times. But the folks that were behind it, Emil Turk of CBS Labs at the time, they developed I'll call them algorithms, but the way the box performed, the way the audio was handled, is what today people like Fraunhofer and others use as models for MPEG and for AAC. And these are things you can read about. But think about that. Back in the 1960s and 70s, they're talking about perceptual audio coding, but in the analog domain. And that's what those boxes were designed around. And it's just,
psychoacoustics.
Psychoacoustics. I'm sorry, yes, the psychoacoustics.
Psychoacoustics.
But when you fast forward to today, and between the Omnia 9 and the Omnia 11, you can do a lot now because the technology lets you do it. Whereas back then, you're pretty much locked into a particular way, and that was it. Why we had a disdain for those boxes.
Yeah, but no, and you want to know what's really sad? If I had one of those old tube limiters, I would sell it to them, and I would take the money happily. And then I'm afraid I would be laughing at them behind their back as they walked away with it. Because, I love how they're actually, it's a shame Kirk couldn't be here because he could back me up on this. I'm sure there are probably studios up in Nashville that probably advertise the fact that they have some of these old tube limiters. They weren't too bad, for example, to ride level on a single instrument or on a voice. But if you think you are going to run the full music mix into those things, it's going to sound like doo-doo.
Right.
They sound awful. But these people are paying $10,000 and $20,000 for them.
Yeah.
And they're proud of it.
Absolutely. Well, if you go to, just to wrap up our sponsorship with Omnia 9, just remember, write down omniaaudio.com/9. Check it out. You're going to like what you see. And from there, it's your imagination is your limitation. That's what I'm going to say. So I'm going to close with that. So Omnia 9 is the thing to look at. Definitely check it out. The processor does exactly as advertised, and the folks behind it, Leif Clayson and the others that help develop it, make it happen, it's genius, and you're going to love it. So just use your imagination and go wild. So omniaaudio.com/9. So speaking of when you were saying, Nashville and folks using it for single instruments, whether Volume Max, Audimax and stuff, what about the URI LA3s?
Oh, yeah.
How many studios still have those, and people will die for that? Matter of fact, there are plugins, computer workstation plugins for those. How cool is that? The 1176, the LA3s. I mean, who would have thought?
Well, it's a special sound is what you get used to. That's like, actually, if you listen, the standard Nashville guitar sound is extremely compressed. It's real smacky, real compressed.
Right.
I guess if you or I were to really critique it on the basis of audio processing, we'd say, wow, that's the release time on that thing is about 1/1000th of a second. Why don't you slow it down and smooth it out a little? But they're going for that sound. Well, so this, to me, the same with the some of these older limiters. If you were looking for a particular sound, Billy Gibbons will not discuss. People ask him how he gets his sounds. He won't tell you. He'll say, that's my secret. But there have been rumors for years that in the early days, the way he got his sound was with a tube. I think it was either URI or what was the other one? Started with the letter T. But anyway, it was one of those tube limiters, and he overdrove it. And that's how he got his sound, like on LaGrange and all of those other early ZZ Top songs.
Well, I had LA3s I used in production studios, and I did some on-air work with them. And I dissected it, and I found it was interesting. Prior to me learning what the LA3 was about, in my youthful days of experimenting with broadcast equipment and doing stuff, I actually came up with a way of compressing audio using a light bulb and a CDS cell, or electric eye, as some people used to remember them. So I did this thing, and I actually did the tape outputs of a stereo tuner. And you increase the volume, and the tape output would light the bulb, and the CDS cell would reduce it. And I created a compressor using my stereo tuner so I could do some FM transmission. I thought it was pretty novel. I was like, wow, this is pretty cool. Then later on, I take apart an LA3 URI, and I look at the module, the opto module, and what is it? It's a what is it? Fluorescent? What do they call it? Iridescent patch. Square patch, a green square patch, and a CDS cell.
Yep.
So I was like, wow. So I started doing experiments with an oscilloscope to see what it looked like, and why did this thing sound the way it did when you, as you point out, you turn it all the way up and get it really grungy, but it still sounded. It had an artistic sound to it. We'll call it that. It was grungy, but had an artistic sound, and it was just the way the light bulb, intensity as it got brighter or less bright or dim. It wasn't a sharp on and off or a cliff. It was just a slow, gradual increase and decrease. And that's where you got the effect. Because if you went further, there were people who made processors later on that used LEDs in a CDS cell, or what's known as the LDR. And it just didn't have the same effect. And if you look at it on a scope, you're like, wow, it's like a sharp cutoff and turn on. But when you looked at the LA3 or the 1176, you're saying, wow, what the heck is different here? And it sounded, the audible differences were apparent. And I think that's the passion in me when I've done audio for stations, and people look at me like I'm nuts when they've come up with some settings. They're like, that really does work. I said, yeah. And it's so loud. Are you sure we're legal? I'm like, absolutely. I had several visits from the FCC on many occasions claiming that they received complaints from my competition that we were overmodulating. And the FCC, they show up after they've made their measurements. So it's not like as if you have a chance to do anything. Yeah. And we pass with a clean bill of health every time. And, that's, if you do it right, you can have some good stuff. And nowadays with the digital stuff, it's even faster. You can really get crazy and do stuff and have fun.
Well, what's so amazing about the digital stuff is they have taken multiband to just almost crazy levels. I mean, they can, they're just, with modern microprocessors, with the digital audio processing, with all that stuff, they can take that signal, breaking up into individual frequency bands, analyze it, and then just do exactly what sounds the best on it. Which, by the way, that Omnia 9 does do an excellent job of doing that.
Oh, it does.
But takes all of that, even anticipates. In fact, you want to know one big difference, and this is something anyone can hear. When you're listening, driving around listening to stations, think of a song that you remember from like the 70s or the 80s, just off the top of my head, one like, oh, good heavens, I just drew a blank. But a song that starts off, for example, with like a guitar, and then when the kick drum comes in, and you'll hear the volume start dropping. On most modern processors, if you listen to them, those things are so smart, and they can anticipate what's going on. You will actually hear the volume drop just a pinch before that drum starts. I mean, they're actually anticipating what's coming.
Yeah, absolutely. We had Mike Rowe as a guest a couple of weeks ago, and we were talking about the evolution of audio processing, the approach, and some of the things that he did and explained. And, you know, as we all know, Mike Rowe started off with the multiband processing. And, you know, I guess you could honestly say he was the guy that started the craze of multiband processing, and just, you know, things went from there. But it's just fascinating, the stuff he talked about and some of the production and studio work that was done and how they went about things, just like you're pointing out. And it comes right back to what you said earlier in the show. It's the passion you have for what it is you do. You know, whether you're a software developer or a broadcast engineer or you're a transmitter RF guy, and, you know, I mean, I've worked on a lot of RF stuff, and I've done some really crazy black magic stuff, because we all know RF is just black magic, whether it's a cell phone or an AM or FM transmitter. You know, there's the laws of physics can be applied. You can bend them, but if you try to break them, it hurts. And those RF burns do hurt.
That's like when I was showing the inside of a FM transmitter to my assistants not long after they went to work for me. I said, now, believe it or not, this little swinging bar here takes the 30,000 watts off that tube and puts it in the antenna. Isn't that amazing?
Oh, yeah.
And I said, and they said, well, how does it do that? And I go, witchcraft.
Oh, it's so true. It's so true.
Magic.
It is. Well, we're beginning to run out of time. We're down to our last few minutes. We try to keep the show to some cohesive, a moment in time, about an hour. So before we wrap up, I had a question for you, and that I sort of asked earlier, but I'm going to have to do it now. Looking to the future of broadcast, both AM, FM, TV, do you see the skill sets changing? You mentioned one of your assistants is sort of the IT guy, another guy is sort of RF. Do the two blend over? Does your RF guy have enough IT understanding to do things, or is it really delineated between the two disciplines?
Oh, yeah. In fact, to some of our older viewers, listeners, whatever you want to call them, you better get some IT under your belt. You better learn how streaming works. You better learn how to hook up a network. If you don't know how to do that, or you're not going to have a job within 3 or 4 years. I mean, you're not going to have a job, because that's where we're all going. And in fact, this may not touch directly on your question, but thinking about, I just did an article not long ago for, it was a special publication that Radio World did, and it was on transmitter efficiency. Very interesting. I actually enjoyed doing that article. And the truth of the matter is, sometimes you will hear old timers talk about, oh, I remember the days when we had the Gates BC1G and they were bulletproof. Yes, and they sounded like Dookie. And the tubes were expensive. And they ate electrical power like a pig. But whereas you look at the new transmitters, they use a lot less power. They're more efficient. They sound better. They're cleaner, and they're more reliable. So I don't know. Where am I going with this? You've got to
change with the times.
You've got to change with the times. You've also got to read constantly. You've got to stay on top of what's new and what's coming. You've got to be agile.
This is true.
You've got to be flexible.
Well, speaking along those lines of being flexible and agile and keeping up the times, I remember years ago talking with someone about FM exciters. and I was trying out some new exciter. I forget which brand it was. I don't know if it was BE. Somebody was doing direct FM, and they said, well, this is just not as good as the old Continental or it was the RCA, I think, at the time. And I said, well, actually, I think it's better. And they said, why? I said, well, those other exciters you mentioned, they do pre-distortion in the modulator section to sort of flatten out the anomalies in the design and the way it works. And they all looked at me like, what? I said, yeah, you may want to look into that. I said, I think that's why I'm actually getting better results with this new exciter. And I'm still using a tube transmitter, mind you. It was a FM 5H Gates / Harris and a tube final, but they were like, yeah, but no, this is better. This is a much better design, a better box. They were familiar with it. That's what I'm getting at.
Yeah, that's what it is.
They were familiar with it. And I was like, okay, I understand. I grew up on those 802As and the RCAs that were turned later to become a different name, the older models that everybody did. And I was like, yeah, but, it's like the early days of exciters where the PLL would unlock when you had a heavy bass note. Remember those days?
Oh, yeah. Yes.
Exactly. That's when PLLs were coming into play, and people were like, oh, this phase lock loop thing is definitely good, but, I can make it fall apart when I play this particular song from Aerosmith. Oh, yeah, it's great.
Remember it well.
Yeah. So, you're right. It's, if there's a takeaway from this evening, from this broadcast or netcast, I would say those of us, both young and old or in between or just young at heart, whatever you want to call it, continue to be relevant, stay current, read, understand, ask questions, be willing to listen. I know I've been accused of listening too much, not saying enough, but the reality is you need to listen before you make any real decisions and answer people. And, get involved with those who are less understanding. If you have somebody on staff who's interested in something in technology, but you're afraid they just don't have enough chutzpah for it because they just didn't have the same background or growing up with the information you did, throw that out. Bring them in, show them. People can absorb information. It's how you approach it. Because I can tell you, I have some friends who I can't let them near the RF stuff because they definitely get hurt. But there's some other things they can do that are just brilliant. I'm like, okay, we'll get you into the RF side eventually. But right now, your other talents are really worth having. And I learned a lot from that. I mean, I have a friend of mine, you give him a device and he can reverse engineer it within 2 days and be there with a schematic. And you're like, whoa, how'd you do that? But you put him in a room with people for a party and yeah, that stereotype comes right out. So, be relevant, learn to understand, be understanding, and you'll be surprised what you can find. It sounds like you have two excellent assistants that make your day much easier.
For a great company. I have great assistants. I'm a very happy and very blessed man.
Excellent. All right, then. I think we're going to wrap things up here this week in Radio Tech. Reminder to everybody, our guest today was Stephen Poole, CE, Chief Engineer, Crawford Broadcasting, Birmingham, Alabama. Very good broadcast company. Those of us who are in the business know darn well they're a good company. You read the articles and the success stories. So I'm going to add that in from my personal side. And also our sponsor for today's broadcast, Omnia Audio, Omnia 9. Omnia, that's it. Shout it out loud. Open the windows in your house and shout it out. And you're not going to take it anymore. Omnia is the only way to go. And remember, Leif Clayson, who created the Omnia 9, took a different approach. So you need to take a different approach in your market, create a signature, and knock the pants off the competition. Because at the end of the day, it's about generating revenue. The real cool thing is, if you do it with some fun, then you really have a good time. Trust me, it works, it happens, that's the way to do it. So, as your host this evening, Chris Tobin saying good night, be well, and this week in radiotech.com, you can find out more, and the GFQ network, where we have our host, distribution. You can find out all the back shows. We'll have this one posted sometime soon, and you can get to play it back, download it on your personal player. Oh, that's right. It's no longer a radio only now, isn't it? So, again, things have changed. The times are changing. So, Steve, you have anything you'd like to say before we go dark for the night?
Not at all. I just say ta-ta.
I want to thank you very much for making the time. Are you doing it from the station? Is that where you are?
Yes.
I'm in studio.
I'm in Studio S5.
Oh.
I'm in Studio S5. Behind me is Control Room G5.
Oh my goodness! Do you have acronyms for different operations within the facility?
Yes, we have 5 stations here.
Excellent. No, it's really good. Hey, I'm just curious. Is there a newscaster? I know, I believe he works for a different company. James Faraday in that market still? Does that sound familiar?
That does not ring a bell now.
Okay. Maybe he's no longer on the air. Okay. No, it was a friend of mine I used to work with many, many, many years ago. And he and his wife moved to Birmingham, and he was doing news. I forget which operation he was with. I know it wasn't Crawford, but it was another broadcast group in town. So I was just curious if he was still on the radio. He may not be. All right, that's fine. Alrighty then. So I guess we'll wrap things up. Thank you all for tuning in. Be sure to download for later posterity. You may have missed something. Check it out. And remember, sponsor, audio, Omnia Audio 9. That's all you need to know. After that, contact your distributor. If they don't know, get rid of them, get somebody else. All right, all. Good night. Be well.
That's all the bandwidth we can pilfer this week. Another TWiRT is propagated, and all the transmitters and audio equipment live happily ever after, thanks to the handsome engineer and his kind, benevolent care. We'll be back next week.
Lord willing and the creek don't rise.
This week in Radio Tech. Subscribe to iTunes and you'll never miss a show. Search for This Week in Radio Tech in the iTunes Store. Soliciting is strictly encouraged. If you like today's show, tell a friend. If you didn't like it, we were never here. Kirk Harnack's wardrobe provided by the Salvation Army and the Red Cross Disaster Relief Services. Hair and makeup provided by Penelope Garcia Hernandez Weinberg.
He's unique, wouldn't you say?
I just want to get it over with.
This ends this transmission. Tango, Whiskey, India, Romeo, Tango. Signing off. Okay.